This time we encounter a place that Spanish investigator and author José Antonio Caravaca once described as perhaps the strangest region on the planet. This place has it all. Paranormal phenomena, faith healers, uncanny photographs, close encounters with UFOs, and unexplained creatures. The impossible seems to have reached critical mass in one part of the Russian Perm region. This, Caravaca writes, is one of the most astonishing, unsettling, and unknown places that still exist on our planet. The primary site for this concentration of anomalies, still unfamiliar to most outside Russia, even decades after the collapse of the Soviet Union, is the modest village of Molebka. With barely 465 inhabitants, it sits within a vast and emblematic natural landscape nestled in the Urals, about 1,000 kilometers east of Moscow near the border with Asia. Although steeped in a long tradition of enigmas and ancient magical rituals, it was not until 1984 that Molebka began to truly attract the interest of anomaly seekers. Caravaca tells us that this story began with Emil Bachurin, one of the first investigators to enter Molebka's forests and mountains in search of answers. He was drawn there by reports of a strange event on October 29, 1984, when a giant circle, 60 meters across, was found etched into the snow. Locals claimed it had been left by some kind of object that landed silently during the night. But it was journalist Pavel Muhortov who gave the region its most popular moniker. During an expedition in 1989, he coined the term Molebka Triangle, and with that, the area's reputation exploded beyond the borders of the former Soviet Union. The name caught on, attracting waves of visitors, researchers, and thrill seekers. Slowly, a legend took shape: the mythology of Zone M. From that moment on, expeditions and investigations poured into the region, each one hoping to uncover what lay behind Molebka's strange reputation. Even Jacques Vallée, one of the most respected names in ufology, took a serious interest in the area in 1991. It did not take long for researchers to realize that the mystery went far deeper than a single incident. The roots stretched into the past. Local legends tell of hidden magical rites, ancient sacrifices meant to appease the gods, and a rich oral tradition passed down through generations. Molebka is also known for its extraordinary healers, said to possess knowledge no clinic could explain. And still, the singularities of Zone M continue to build. In certain areas, witnesses described a clear sense of presence, unusual sensations, the feeling of being watched, sudden pockets of deep silence that felt almost physical, like an invisible pressure sealing off the air. Animals were often the first to react, behaving erratically in places where something seemed out of joint. To this day, some locals still avoid the forests after dark. Fear of the night runs deep, and only a handful of people dare to enter the most isolated stretches once the sun goes down. Field studies revealed striking anomalies. Instruments picked up spikes in radiation and irregular electromagnetic readings that defied known environmental patterns. These distortions interfered with compasses, mobile phones, and other electronic equipment, which either failed or behaved unpredictably within the boundaries of what came to be called Zone M. We will trace the outlines of a case that was reported by Vladimir S. At the time of the events, he was just 18 years old, dealing with the consequences of a serious back injury after a fall at work. With no answers from conventional medicine, his family decided to send him to the isolated Molebka region in the Ural Mountains, a place known for its therapeutic effects and surrounded by stories of unexplained phenomena. Vladimir, weakened and having difficulty walking, embarked on the journey accompanied by his mother. Their final destination was a small peninsula on the banks of the Chusovaya River, where they camped with a small group of seekers of healing. Leaning on a cane, Vladimir's every step reflected the pain that accompanied him. At that time, in the mid-1970s, he had no idea that that isolated place was part of a mysterious region, later known as the M Zone, an enigmatic spot full of unexplained phenomena. Eyewitness reports from the Molebka Triangle are filled with accounts of beings that defy explanation. Dozens of encounters describe humanoid figures appearing in the most secluded parts of the landscape, often seen only briefly and leaving little trace beyond fear and confusion. One of the earliest of these incidents occurred on October 18, 1987. A local man was gathering firewood in a dense forest when he saw something at a distance of about 120 meters. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and dressed in bright green trousers with a jacket of the same color, though glossier. The figure held a metallic container in its hands. It looked directly at him. The man shouted, and in an instant the figure was gone. There was no tree or slope to hide behind, no fog to obscure the view. It simply vanished. At the spot where it had stood, the man found a trail of footprints, each over 40 centimeters long. Years later, in the summer of 1996, Russian investigator Valery Yakimov had his own encounter. A leading expert on the region, Yakimov had spent nights in the field, mapping where strange events most often occurred. "It was our third night in Zone M," he later recalled. "I was with a group of tourists and led them to a place where the presence of what we call the unknown world feels strongest. We split into two groups. The moon was bright, and the visibility was perfect. As I descended a small ravine, I saw something that made me freeze. When I got closer, I saw it clearly. A black figure, about 3 meters tall. Humanoid, but absolutely still. I do not know how long I stood there, paralyzed. My friend was waiting for me in the field above. He was shocked by what I told him. He saw nothing. Neither did the others who arrived moments later." On his blog, José Antonio Caravaca writes that these kinds of sightings form the living folklore of Zone M. They are not isolated events. They belong to a growing archive of testimony from people who had no reason to invent what they saw. José Antonio Caravaca first heard about Molebka, not through documents or second-hand stories, but in person, from the mouth of the witness himself. José was attending to affairs in the Spanish province of Granada, and that was where he met Dr. Vladimir S., a Russian-born physician who had been living in Spain for over a decade. The meeting was unplanned, but what Vladimir shared with Caravaca would turn out to be one of the most extraordinary testimonies connected to the region. It was an experience he had never spoken about publicly until that day. In a quiet setting, Vladimir gave his account directly to Caravaca, who would later document it in his research and revisit it in his book, Distortion, where he explores how strange phenomena may not follow the rules we expect. Vladimir explained that in 1976, at the age of 18, he had suffered a serious spinal injury from a workplace accident. The damage had left him dependent on crutches and, at times, confined to a wheelchair. Though doctors called it a reversible injury, they held little hope for a full recovery. His mother, herself a doctor, refused to give up. She consulted several colleagues, and two of them, one Russian, one Japanese, mentioned a remote region in the Urals called Molebka. The place, they said, was known for unexplained healings and natural properties that seemed to benefit the human body. They spoke of healers, of energy, of something in the land. Within weeks, Vladimir and his mother made the journey. They set up camp on a small island in the Chusovaya River, a narrow piece of land about 300 meters long and 150 meters wide. What struck Vladimir most was the silence. There were no insects, no birds, no movement in the trees or underbrush. The area felt abandoned by life itself. They planned to stay for several days. It was on one of the final nights that everything changed. Around 3 or 4 in the morning, Vladimir woke with a need to step outside. He walked about 20 meters from their shelter. That was when he saw it. Something was rising from the surface of the river, an object, oval-shaped and glowing softly in a dull yellow light. It was translucent and silent, completely silent. Frozen in place, Vladimir watched as the object hovered before him. A wave of heat passed over his face, sharp and immediate, cutting through the chill of the night. Inside the craft stood a humanoid figure, nearly 1.90 meters tall, unmoving, with long hair and arms pressed to its sides. Vladimir could not see its feet. Then came the beam. From the top of the object, a sharp green light, like a laser, struck him directly between the eyes. He compared it to the flash of a camera. His vision went white. For a moment he was blind. When his vision returned, the object was lifting off. It rose slowly, drifted to the right, and disappeared into the dark without a sound. In the days that followed, something began to shift. The pain in Vladimir's back eased. His strength returned. The pain lessened. Within a short time, he no longer needed crutches. He began walking without assistance. The injury that had once seemed permanent was gone, and he no longer needed crutches or the wheelchair. "I don't know if it was related to what I saw, but I recovered without any complications," he told Caravaca. At the time in the mid-1970s, he had never heard of Zone M. That would come much later. In late 1988, by coincidence or not, a colleague invited him to participate in an expedition to Molebka, organized by the Riga Research Center. Dr. Vladimir joined the team as a physician, contributing to a multidisciplinary project that brought together experts from various fields, including geology and physics. The group consisted of around 40 people and remained in the area for approximately 2 weeks. After 12 years, Dr. Vladimir returned to the very island where his earlier encounter had taken place. Until then, he had never spoken of it to anyone. During the expedition, several anomalies were recorded. Dr. Vladimir described them in detail. "With the help of various scientific instruments," he explained, "we found that the island had radiation levels slightly above normal. But the strangest thing was that our watches stopped not long after we arrived. Later, as we explored the surrounding area, just a few kilometers away, we found a zone with a strong magnetic field. It was strong enough to send the compass needles spinning. In that area, electronic devices often failed, and photographs sometimes came out blurred or with strange spots." These technical disturbances were not the only events of interest. The group also encountered what Vladimir described as that other reality that manifests itself in Molebka. "One evening at dusk," he said, "we saw a very bright reddish sphere moving through the forest, keeping pace with our group as we tried to follow it. After a few minutes, it vanished. I believe some photos and video were taken of the light, which wasn't much bigger than a basketball. But what stayed with the group the most was not the sphere. It was something that happened late at night. Some colleagues told us," Vladimir said, "that while they were sleeping in their tent during the early morning hours, they heard footsteps outside the camp. When they stepped out to investigate, they saw several figures. They saw only their faces, really, with glowing eyes. They panicked and locked themselves back inside the tent. At first they thought it might have been a prank, but no one from the group had left their tents that night. The next morning, one side of their shelter had strange markings, slashes, tears in the fabric with no clear cause. I don't know what is happening there, but it is truly, truly strange." It's important to remember that Vladimir had never shared the story publicly until speaking with Caravaca. The interview, and the notes collected during it, became part of Caravaca's broader investigation into what he calls distortion events. In his book, Distortion, Caravaca places cases like Vladimir's in a wider framework, where unexplained phenomena appear to emerge through a complex interaction between environment, perception, and unknown stimulus. On his blog, Caravaca connects this to the deeper historical context of the region, drawing on the work of S.A. Beljaevsky, author of Molebka, Pages of History, who outlines the early background of what is now also known as Zone M. There is reason to believe that people have been living in the Silva Valley for more than 2,000 years. Not far from the mouth of the Molebka River, there was a site of offerings, where sacrifices were carried out by people known as the Vogli. The Russians who arrived in the Silva region years later called this place Molebnoye, which means place of invocation. According to legend, the Magi and other members of the cult chose their ritual sites carefully. It is possible that their search for knowledge was not in vain, and that this knowledge was passed down, generation after generation. In the mid-1990s, Dr. Alexandra Chuvirov of the State University of Bashkiria began researching possible Chinese migration into the Ural region. While searching archives in the university, he uncovered 18th century notes describing some 200 engraved stone tablets near the village of Chandar. In 1999, the search took a decisive turn when a local official, Vladimir Krynov, revealed the presence of a large stone tablet buried in his yard. A week later, excavation began. The object, later named the Dashka stone, was transported to the university. Once cleaned, researchers were stunned to discover what appeared to be a three-dimensional topographic map. The stone measured 148 by 106 by 16 centimeters and weighed roughly 1 ton. Scans showed it was artificially made, likely with precision tools. At first sight, I understood that was not a simple stone piece, said Chuvirov, but a real map, and not a simple map, but a three-dimensional. What exactly is the origin of this controversial artifact? The discoverers refer to the author of the object simply as the maker of maps, the creator. For others, the Dashka stone reveals more about our modern desires and mythologies than about any ancient civilization. While its supposed precision and enigmatic markings have led to bold claims about lost advanced cultures or extraterrestrial cartographers, there is a troublesome lack of scientific consensus and verifiable evidence that has invited a lot of skepticism. Some scientists now believe the tablet itself was created roughly 3,000 years ago. Though difficult to date precisely, it is clear that the craftsmanship and detail remain extraordinary for that time period. How it was carved with such precision, or whether we are simply doing the human thing and seeing patterns where there are none, remains an open question. So where does that leave us? There is clearly a range of evidence. There is the terrain, the electromagnetic readings, and the archival records. We have first-hand witnesses, consistent patterns, and a long oral tradition that predates any modern instrumentation. We even have the archaeological traces, the sacrificial sites, and a place name history that suggests a deeper, layered significance. What we don't have is closure, but that doesn't change what we already do know. The legacy of Zone M exists, it's on the map, and it's been demanding attention for a long time. But as always here on Stories Lost, you're free to form your own view. We hope you'll join the comments and share your perspective. If you enjoy what we do, don't forget to leave us a thumbs up, subscribe, or join our membership. We appreciate all your support and feedback. If next Friday feels a long way off, we hope you'll take some time to explore José Antonio Caravaca's blog, YouTube channel, or X account. You'll find all the links in the description. Stay curious, and we'll see you next time. We would like to welcome the following new members to the channel and say thank you for coffee and supers. And as always, we of course want to thank our ongoing supporters. You're the best.